Hello and welcome to this week's video. I'm J-Hope and I'm Madison, and this week I'm going to talk about my K-pop journey, which is why I have adorable little J-Hope here from BTS. Also have a monkey.
Hello.
It's Charles Dickens and his little puppy friend is Bernard. Like I promised a couple videos back, I am going to share with you my K-pop journey, how I got into it, why I got into it, and also why I ended up leaving K-pop. I do want to start off by saying that I still really enjoy K-pop. I love listening to the music, I will watch the occasional music video, and I do think that K-pop is awesome still. I'm just not following it like I used to. When I talk about getting into K-pop, I often like to start with Super Junior. And while they are the ones that encouraged me down the rabbit hole, they're technically not the ones that introduced me to K-pop. Technically, my very first expedition into K-pop was with Gina and Big Bang. I think Big Bang came first, and I honestly don't remember which Gina song I heard that got me into her, but those were my first two K-pop groups slash soloists that I really got into. I was actually introduced to K-pop back before I even knew what K-pop was through a MEP studio. For those of you who don't know what MEPs are, they're multiple editor projects, and they're typically, the ones I watch are typically anime. So a whole bunch of editors edit these really cool, almost music videos to various songs, and yeah, that's how I discovered at least Big Bang, Fantastic Baby. Wow! I wanna dance, 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 dance. Fantastic Baby. I would actually watch MEPs back then for the anime, because I was hugely into anime far more than I am right now. And two, to discover new music. I did listen to the radio, finally, back then, but I also would watch MEPs for new music, and Fantastic Baby was one of them, and I mainly loved it because it was a bunch of Beastie Boys and just like really attractive anime men in that MEP, and that was a huge reason why I was super into Big Bang. Like I said, I don't remember my first Gina song, but I do remember watching a lot of her music videos. Again, I don't know how I got into her. It might have been an MEP video, or it might have just been something that popped up in my recommended after I watched the K-pop MEPs. I'd like to emphasize again that at this time I had no idea that it was K-pop. I knew that it was in a foreign language, but I didn't know what language that was, and a part of me didn't even care what language it was. I just really liked the song. I remember it was probably one afternoon. I went onto iTunes and just searched Gina and Big Bang, and I just listened to their music. I think I went back to YouTube and just listened to their full albums and really loved a lot of their songs. Emphasize again, at this point, I had no idea that it was K-pop. I just liked the music. So technically, Gina and Big Bang were my first forays into K-pop back before I even knew what in the heck it was. Fast forward to sophomore year of college, so it's been several years, and a video popped up in my recommended. It probably popped up in my recommended because of the MEPs that I watched that had K-pop music in them, but it was Super Junior's Mr. Simple. I loved it. I went down the rabbit hole, especially with Super Junior, and just absolutely fell in love. Here's why. I'm not a big music video fan, except when the music video really emphasizes dancing, because I love dancing. I love watching it. I love doing it myself, even though I'm not a professional or anything. But dancing is huge for me. So when I found music videos and songs and kind of an industry devoted to dancing, I was all over it. I I was first attracted to Super Junior because they are attractive people. Pretty much everyone in K-pop is super attractive and it's sickening and amazing both at the same time. So, obviously that was the very first like superficial thing. I was like, wow, they're all super cute. And then it was, this is awesome dancing. I love that they have choreography to in pretty much every single one of their music videos. That to me was a huge draw. And I wanted to know their names. I think a lot of K-pop fans can relate to that, that might be their first real deep dive into K-pop, because there were two members of Super Junior that I thought were super, super cute, and I was like, what are their names? Their names turned out to be Siwon and Donghae. Donghae turned out to be one of my biases in Super Junior. But in trying to figure out their names, I found this whole other aspect to K-pop that I really hadn't seen in Western music before, and that's the variety shows and the V Lives and just all of all of these videos, all of this content about the group and the members. And, they'd go on to variety shows and make complete fools of themselves. And it was so fun because I hadn't experienced that before. It was like they invited us to get to know them in a way, and I understand that a lot of K-pop is very manufactured, from the personalities of the members to the music itself, but it felt so inviting and welcoming, and I loved getting to know these people. Also, Korean is a very pretty language to me. It sounds like poetry every time they talk. I don't know why. It's just, I love it. Having that added aspect of this sense of getting to know them and having such a plethora of content available was a huge reason why I got into K-pop. There's also the very fun aspect of figure out who your bias is, because 9 times out of 10 you don't choose your bias chooses you. And it was so fun to memorize all these names and these faces and to be like, oh, I really like this one, but this one's talking to me too. And for me, that was a big reason why I stayed in the fandom, was because of the members themselves and connecting with people that I'd never met and probably would never meet. It was super appealing to me. Plus the dancing and really good music. They just have some awesome music in K-pop and some amazing voices, and just their talent blows me away. Before I go into why I left K-pop, I'll kind of just guide you through my standing journey. So obviously it started off with Super Junior, and then I believe I got into EXO. During that time, I didn't realize that there's this whole culture and vernacular dedicated to K-pop. So I was just like, oh, he's my favorite. Oh, he's my favorite. But this guy keeps looking at me, and I'm kind of side-eyeing him too. So like, I don't know. When I realized that there was an entire culture surrounding this, I discovered, bias and bias wrecker and UB, ultimate bias, and ultimate bias groups. And there's just like, there's so much vocabulary involved. And I know I'm getting off topic here, but having something be so niche and to belong to a community where there is this specific vernacular almost enjoys the same journey. It's still very individual, but it's the same basic experience, and being able to share in that with others was super, super nice, especially for me, because one of the big reasons I sought out K-pop as much as I did at that time was I was super, super homesick. I was going through a rough time, because apparently going through a rough time sophomore year of college is the norm, but I was going through a really rough time and I just wanted to go home, and K-pop and the community and culture that surrounded K-pop was kind of my safe haven. It became my home away from home when I was just super, super homesick. Anyway, back to my journey. Super Junior, EXO. So technically, my first ultimate bias was Dio, Kyungsoo from EXO. And that's kind of when the Pinterest obsession started. I saved thousands upon thousands of pins on Pinterest because they're very attractive people. After that, I discovered the community and everything. I think that was when I discovered K-pop Amino. And ironically enough, I found K-pop Amino through a YouTube video that had absolutely nothing to do with YouTube. Or YouTube with K-pop. That had nothing to do with K-pop. And I was like, oh hey, that might be handy for me. So I went on to K-pop Amino and just kind of fell into the community aspect of K-pop. After EXO, I ended up finding a whole bunch of groups, but the group that I really resonated with in the beginning was VIX. I hadn't cried while watching some of that extra content before until I found VIX, and I don't remember what VIX series it was, but I remember just laughing and crying and having kind of this permanent grin on my face the entire time I was watching, and that felt so nice for me. So VIX very much became my ultimate bias group, and they were my ultimate bias group for a long time, actually. Around this time, I also found Monsta X, and I found them through Hero. That was very big at the time, and I fell in love with IM. I am what I am, man. And so he became kind of my first, once I knew all the terminology, kind of my first official ultimate bias. As time went on and I discovered more and more groups, my ultimate biases and ultimate bias groups changed a lot. My next ultimate bias became Boo Sung-kwan from 17. And I was obsessed, like obsessed. I watched fan edits, fan cams all the time. I sought him out in every single music video, and I was straight up obsessed with Boo Sung-kwan. And at one point, my username was Sunshine, as in sunshine, but with Boo involved. I can't really say much has changed, because that's kind of, coon-fabulate. But I was obsessed and extremely happy. I wasn't necessarily delusional because I was like, I will probably never meet him, and that's okay. But he just brought me so much joy, and I loved him a lot, a lot, a lot. Shortly after this, I found Snooper, and I became a huge, underrated boy group, girl group fanatic, where I was like, yo, let's talk about all these groups that don't have as much views or as big of a fandom, and let's push them into the spotlight as much as we can to give them more attention and more love, more fans. So Snooper, I was kind of like the official Snooper spokesperson in a sense, especially on K-pop Amino. But towards the end of my K-pop journey, I was finally getting into girl groups, so that was nice. And that's when I finally found my first ultimate bias girl group, which is Elris. I loved their music. I remember the first time I listened to them, I just kind of had Spotify playing and it was playing just random songs. Elris ended up playing and I was like, they sound like fairies. I am in a fairyland right now and I love it. So Elris became my ultimate bias girl group. And shortly after that, my ultimate bias boy group, changed from Snooper to NCT. And NCT were the ones who kind of rounded me out and brought me out of not that they're the reason I left the K-pop fandom, but they were the ones that I ended my K-pop journey with. And I'm really happy that I did because I bias freaking every single one of them. And if you know anything about NCT, you know that that's a lot of freaking biases. But as you can tell from, every single one of my socials have the same username, Kun Fabulate. Kun, Jungkoon, is a member of NCT, and he was my absolute favorite because I felt like he and I had a lot in common. But they were the ones that I ended my K-pop journey with, and it's not, I didn't end my K-pop journey because of them. It's a very important distinction. So, why did I leave K-pop, especially if I still really enjoy the music? One of the big reasons I struggled a lot towards the end of my 3.5 year stint, which is no time at all to be a K-pop fan, but I really struggled with the concept of loyalty. I don't know if it was something that was self-imposed or was kind of an expectation of the K-pop fandom and community, which is the sense of once you find an ultimate bias or an ultimate bias group, you have to stick with them. I couldn't. My loyalties changed, and there was a part of me that felt like such a bad fan because my ultimate bias changed a lot. My ultimate bias groups changed a lot, and it felt like I was just being a really bad fan. I eventually got over that, and I was like, screw that. Enjoy K-pop however you're going to enjoy it. K-pop is yours to enjoy however you enjoy it, whatever way. And I actually ended up making a lot of posts on K-pop Amino about that. So loyalty wasn't as much of a reason anymore, but it definitely started to pull me away, at least from the community. Again, I don't know if it was an expectation of that fandom or if it was self-imposed. Either way, I started not enjoying the realm of K-pop as much. Editing Madison here. I wanted to just briefly touch on the topic of fans because I think a lot of people, when they think of K-pop, they think of K-pop fans and how crazy and fanatic they are. And I'm sure some of you might be wondering if the fans themselves provided any reasons for me to leave. And yes, there are absolutely fans in the K-pop fandom that are crazy and fanatic and probably go a bit overboard, but they were not ultimately a reason why I left K-pop. In my experience, the K-pop fans themselves were all just really passionate, really fun, really talented people. And I met some really good friends through my experience of K-pop and the community surrounding it. So, like with any fandom, K-pop has its bad fans, but in my experience, most of them were all really awesome, really good people. Second thing that brought me out of K-pop was just how exhausting it was. I understand people who stan only one group or one soloist and that's it. Because if you try to follow the hundreds, if not thousands, of K-pop groups that debut a year, you are going to tire yourself out. And that's what happened to me. I got very tired of trying to keep up with every group that I loved. And I love a lot of groups. A lot. I am multi-fandom. It got just really, really tiring for me to try to keep up with every single one of them. When that happened, I made a decision to listen to the new music releases of, this group or this number of groups and soloists and so on and so forth, while following all the content of these select few groups and soloists. The third reason that I ended up leaving K-pop is it is expensive. It is a very expensive hobby. I've always had very cheap hobbies. My number one hobby, and hopefully future career, at least one aspect, is writing. I literally just need a really cheap pen or pencil and a notebook, and I'm good. K-pop, on the other hand, it doesn't have to be expensive, but for me, it turned out to be. I spent a ton of money on the music, on merch, on the albums, and the scary thing about buying K-pop albums and merch is it's addictive. It is weirdly addictive. I don't know why, but it is super addictive, and that's scary because you'll want to spend more money. And I was just spending money like crazy, and it almost got to the point where it was like I didn't want to fund this hobby anymore. So that's the third reason why I ended up leaving K-pop. It's just really expensive. The final reason that I left K-pop is my interest changed. As simple as that. I wasn't as obsessed with K-pop. I was no longer homesick, so I didn't need it anymore. I was venturing out into YouTube far more than I had before, where I was finding YouTubers that I could watch consistently and subscribe to. I think this was around the time that I found Markiplier on YouTube and just absolutely fell in love with his content. So instead of watching K-pop content, I watched Markiplier. So on and so forth. I ended up getting into just a bunch of other things, and that's okay. We have this idea, and I don't know if it's self-imposed or an expectation of society where you can't change. If you've established yourself in some way, you can't veer from it. But that's just not true. People change and interests change, and we should normalize that. We should be okay that someone has changed in the past 5 years or 3 years or even the past week. Change is okay. And most of the time, change is necessary. Also, change is the only constant in life. So that's kind of how I ultimately fell away from K-pop. Was I found other things to fill my time and other things that brought me as much joy as K-pop did. K-pop will always have a very special place in my heart, especially Super Junior, because they were the ones that threw me into the rabbit hole. And there's a strange sense of nostalgia about K-pop for me, even though it hasn't been that long since I fell out of K-pop. And I think I'll always listen to the music because, like I said, it's really freaking good. But I'm not following it like I used to anymore. And that's okay. If you are still into K-pop or you're new to K-pop or whatever, if you have a favorite K-pop song, let me know what it is in the comments down below. Share with me your own K-pop journeys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that bell button for notifications for every single time that I post. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye!